Alrighty guys, a very warm welcome to another video. So today we're going to be talking about this whole business here, which is not something which was really discussed all that much. And it wasn't something that these professional men who did this at Kona were really even asked about. What we're talking about is where the green arrow is pointing, which is this chest pack thing, whatever these guys are running. And before we kind of dismiss it as a gimmick or something that might not even be all that beneficial, I think that I probably would say we should know that when the course record breaker, the bike course record breaker, the first and second positions in the World Championships both do this in the professional men or have similar setups going on. Both Sam Laidlow and Gustav Iden at some stage or at many stages during the bike had a similar setup going on with this chest pack. When they're doing it and very little other people are actually doing it, we should really stand up and take notice, because this is a good opportunity to learn. It's a good opportunity to kind of analyze how this may have benefited them, even in the slightest, and how we can otherwise implement that in our future races to help us out and help us go faster. So there was some discussion on some of the forums about it. Many of these athletes, well, I don't think any of the athletes were actually asked directly. Even the commentators were kind of, I guess, hypothesizing, I should say, what it could be, whether it's a drink bottle, whether it's a cooling pack, is it a camel pack, and whatnot. I think it doesn't really matter what it is, because we can still learn a lot from it regardless. The number one thing is, and we've touched on this with some of our aerodynamic testing or aerodynamics cycling tips videos in the past, is that if you can increase or improve the funnel of wind around your body by closing the gap between your hands and your head, in order to not otherwise be catching a whole bunch of wind at the front end of the bike or the front end of your frontal position on the bike, that's going to be significantly advantageous. And I think that having something on the chest itself is going to complement that and fill gaps that are otherwise being missed in terms of funneling the wind around the body, as like it would around a barrel, but also probably compound that effect even if you are very dialed in with regard to your hand and head position. So there is obvious significant aerodynamic benefit to doing something like this, and I'm sure that athletes wouldn't just be randomly putting things down their front end of their chest if it otherwise disadvantaged them from an aerodynamic perspective. And it makes a lot of sense to me that it would be an aerodynamic advantage. We know that Lionel Sanders ran a camel pack in one of the previous Konas. It might have been 2017 or even no, it would have maybe 16 or even prior. However, and I could be off on my dates there, so don't slam me for that. However, he put it on the back. So he put it high up on the back, on his actual back. So the opposite side of the skin suit, complete 180 degrees around the other side. And on a bike with your, the way in which your head position, etc., that's going to be a negative in terms of an aerodynamic perspective. There are positives to it in terms of, do you improve hydration and therefore your overall outcome of the race will be better. However, from an aerodynamic perspective, it will be negative. If, for example, he had to put that camel pack and had a system set up where he could have put it down the front of the chest, or on the actual front of the chest, down the skin suit, that would likely be aerodynamically advantageous. And I know that Andy Schleck had actually done this once in the past, I believe, before it kind of got banned by the UCI in a time trial, having his hydration down the front of the chest here, because that was shown to be more aerodynamic. And, obviously you can just run a short little tubing system out into the mouth and have easy access to hydration. So we've got a few options as to what of these things could have otherwise been regardless. So it could have been just a standard drink bottle or water bottle. It could have been a camel pack. It could have been a cooling pack. Could have probably been other things as well. I think it's unlikely that the second option here was the case, because I never saw any tubing coming out of these little packs that these guys had down the front end of their chest here. So unlikely to be a camel pack. I'd say more likely to be either a water bottle or a cooling system or a cooling pack. The benefits of having a water bottle, and there was people commenting on this actually, saying that, coming out of transition one, Gustav and Laidlow were both seen to put a water bottle down their front end, but then especially Gustav in the later half of the bike, it looks like his kind of front end, whatever he has down there, was a fair bit different to a standard water bottle, and it actually changed a bit, which potentially indicates it was something else, maybe a cooling pack. The benefits of having a water bottle, of course, is that it's another area in which you can carry your hydration that's not going to negate your aerodynamics and is probably actually going to enhance it anyway. However, I would say that, if you look at Gustav here, he's got the front end system, he's got the one on the down tube, he's also got the one behind the seat in terms of water bottles or hydration systems. So it's unlikely he really needs another hydration system. But even a cold or icy cold water bottle would certainly improve cooling, and potentially, you might not have to stop at one, you might be able to get through one more aid station without having to stop for additional fluid. So there's some advantages there. So obviously the bottle is a good idea, but also a cooling pack. And think about the advantages of the cooling pack. Beyond improving aerodynamics, which I'm sure is not the fundamental thing here, because if it was, you could just put an actual block of something down the front end. It doesn't need to be water-based or anything. It will improve aerodynamics, I'm sure, to some extent, or at least not negatively affect it. But imagine having a cooling pack directly on the chest during a 180-kilometer bike ride like Kona. So this is actually something which I think is overlooked, is cooling on the bike. There's a lot of sponges on the run, etc. But you're traveling at speed on the bike, so you've got wind hitting these areas, at least to some capacity. And the cooling effect on the bike can really be maximized. And I think this is a great idea that a lot of us can learn from, is that spending 4 to 5 hours on the bike, 5, 6, 7, even longer for some age group athletes, the amount of energy saved, watts saved or increased, and then sweat loss minimized can be significant. And it may seem like a bit of a stretch, but bear with me. So compared to not having anything on the chest, having a actual cooling pack on the chest, for example, just a specifically designed container where you can have like instant ice, for example, they can crack it, chuck it in, probably before they're going to be handed it. And then they're just grabbing it, putting it down, and it's like frozen ice, very, very cold on the front end of the chest here. Why is that going to help in a hot race like Kona? Well, you're going to have in hot conditions, for obviously not cold conditions, in hot conditions, the blood flow is redirected to the skin in order to increase sweating and get that cooling effect. So there's two things going on here. There's an increase in sweating, and then there's a redistribution of blood flow to the skin. One, if you can minimize the actual amount of total sweating that your body needs to do to regulate body temperature, that is going to be a significant advantage, because a long race like Kona, dehydration is a huge factor. Number two, if you can minimize the redistribution of blood flow from the big working muscles where they're really going towards producing power and watts, and minimize that blood flow from there to the actual skin, well, you're going to be able to have more blood doing and supplying oxygen to the big muscle groups and producing power. So therefore, you'll increase power to some extent, or at least not lose power, by having blood and oxygen, therefore, going elsewhere, and the elsewhere being the skin surface, to cool down the body. The next thing is that, along with reducing the effects of, or reducing water loss and hydration loss, increasing cooling effect and distribution of blood flow, the next benefit of having a cooling pack down the chest will, of course, be that you can actually save calories, because the whole process of blood flow, redistribution, increase in sweating, and all of the mechanisms, increased cardiac output, all the mechanisms which enable the body to, or allow the body to cool down during hot conditions, do expend a lot of energy and calories. This is the same for when the body's trying to heat up in cold conditions as well. But relatively, the either end of those extremes, so now we're taking, if we look at hot conditions, for example, trying to cool down is going to be a calorie, it's going to require a heavy calorie burden than if you're otherwise racing in like 18 degrees Celsius or something like that. So therefore, increasing the cooling effect without any real input, just by putting something on your chest, can save energy in terms of not having to expend more energy than you otherwise need to in order to cool down. So there's a lot of benefits there. And I think that, like I said at the start of the video, when the top guys are doing it and breaking records, that's when we should really stand up and take note. And this is just one small component of their entire race and what they kind of did different to everyone else, or at least, some of the age groupers, or even the professional males and professional females. And obviously for the females, it's different with their anatomy and physiology and whatnot, to have something down the chest, right? Of course. But for the professional males, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that we can learn a lot from it and at least take some lessons away here, that improvements in aerodynamics, improvements in cooling, improvements in hydration, yeah, this could be a very good idea for anyone going into a hot race in the future. And obviously test all this stuff in training. Don't do anything new in a race, because then you're going to run into trouble potentially. Test it out in training, see what works for you. But I think we should definitely not ignore this fact, because yeah, it could be significant advantages to be had in your next race in a hot condition or hot conditions. So take care, guys. Hopefully that was interesting discussion on the topic here, and I'll see everyone in the next video.